The next time you find yourself traveling somewhere, take a moment to peruse the architecture surrounding your drive. What do the buildings look like? How are they shaped? What do they remind you of? What are their functions? And most importantly, notice how you react emotionally to them. Do these structures inspire you? Do these buildings edify your beliefs? And do you find beauty in them? The images that I've just shown are on a 1 hour and 15-minute drive from Corning, Arkansas to Jonesboro, Arkansas. This is a trip I made many times traveling from home to college. In the first few years, there were many open fields where I could look for deer and enjoy the view on my drive and the surrounding pasture in the fields. It was wide open spaces, beautiful wooded areas, and it was all around a relaxing unwinding as I traversed to collegiate BS. Then, as the days turn into weeks, turn into months, turn into years, I started to notice more and more of these pastures being cleared to make way for a square, lifeless, drab, and depressing cookie cutter architecture that is currently plaguing the modern American landscape. In this essay, we will be analyzing how modern architecture is a detriment and a depressant to our society. And to achieve this end, we will explore the philosophy behind architecture and its importance. We will explore why contemporary architecture is failing us and how to go about fixing the problem. For the philosophical basis of my argument, I will be relying on the man who literally wrote the book on architecture, Vitruvius. Vitruvius was a Roman architect who lived in the 1st century BCE. His work on architecture provided the ancient world with a blueprint for the strategies behind the actual building themselves. His work taught humans where and why the buildings go and how to actually assemble them to get the most use out of them. However, for our purposes, we will be looking at the philosophical and metaphysical views on architecture that Vitruvius espoused. Because to Vitruvius, the very foundation, pun intended, of any architectural structure should have three things: strength, utility, and beauty. Vitruvius believed that architecture is a serious undertaking that should be done by dedicated and intentional minds. For Vitruvius, architecture is a culmination of history, art, music, writing, science, philosophy, nature, and mankind's relationship with them all. In Book 1, Vitruvius writes, "Consequently, since this study is so vast in extent, embellished and enriched as it is with many different kinds of learning, I think that men have no right to profess themselves architects hastily, without having climbed from the boyhood the steps of these studies, and thus, nursed by the knowledge of many arts and sciences, having reached the heights and holy grounds of architecture." Architecture is presented not as a means to an end for humans, but as a natural extension of the surrounding society. A building should not just be a network of materials, it should serve as a monument to our hopes, fears, beliefs, history, and above all, be an edifying force when we gaze upon them. Because of this, the reference of architecture being on holy ground is of no exaggeration to Vitruvius. Centuries later, mustachioed philosopher and famous hater Friedrich Nietzsche had this to say regarding architecture. "In a building, pride is supposed to make itself visible, victory over heaviness, the will to power. Architecture is a kind of oratory of power and forms, sometimes persuading or even flattering, sometimes simply commanding. The highest feeling of power and sureness finds expression in that which has grand style." Architecture is holy and commanding because it is the foundation, again, pun intended, of all human art in the post-agricultural revolution. Because if tomorrow all humans lost the ability to paint breathtaking images, or to write inspiring tales, or to write sublime scores of music, we would survive. It would be a boring, dull existence to be sure, but we would survive. However, if humans lost the ability to build, our modern world collapses within a few generations. Because what use is the Mona Lisa or the Venus de Milo without the Louvre to house them? What use are the Republican values that we hold in America without buildings to project these ideals from? And yes, it is true, most religions tell us our deities reside everywhere, but one can almost see them dwelling in houses of breathtaking worship, such as the Cologne Cathedral or the Hagia Sophia Mosque. These structures serve to house our collective consciousness. The Louvre Pyramid stands as a symbolic marker of our civilization's artistic achievements of beauty and wonder. The Greek and Roman-inspired buildings of D.C. remind those politicians who reside in them of the Republican values they are elected to protect and preserve, or, at least they should. The imposing majesticness of our churches, mosques, temples, and synagogues are an expression of our awe and love toward those we view as our makers. Every structure that we come across has a message, whether intentional or not. Somewhere along the way, we have lost the meaning of the third pillar of Vitruvius, and it has cost us dearly. In this post-industrial revolution world we live in, the human condition in first world countries is that of rampant consumerism. We have sacrificed the diligence and intentionality of architecture in order to raise buildings in the quickest and cheapest way possible. The sooner it is finished, the sooner it can begin turning profits. The Russian anarchist and author Peter Kropotkin had this to say about the post-industrial revolution modern city-state. When a Greek sculptor chiseled his marvel, he endeavored to express the spirit and the heart of the city, all its passions, all its traditions of glory, where to live again in the work. But today, the united city has ceased to exist. There is no more communion of ideas. The town is a chance agglomeration of people who do not know one another, who have no common interest, save that of enriching themselves at the expense of one another. Written over 130 years ago, Kropotkin correctly identifies the ills of a society that switches from a landscape dotted with glorious works of human achievement that inspire to congested urban jungles that kill the human spirit. Now, let's move away from the philosophical and abstract view of philosophy and its relationship to human emotion, and let's take a look at what science tells us about architecture and how we react to it. The psychology department at the University of Waterloo wrote an excellent article that really compiles decades of research on just how architecture affects how you feel. And the results mirror the observation made by Kropotkin over 100 years ago. The most striking part of the article was the statistics on mental health for those dwelling in urban areas. The article points to a number of studies have shown that growing up in a city doubles the chances of someone developing schizophrenia and increases the risk for other mental disorders such as depression and chronic anxiety. Now, obviously, this is not all the cause of poor architecture, but it does have a significant impact. The article cites the research of Colin Ellard and Charles Montgomery to show the connections between human emotions and the architectures around them. In their research with the BMW Guggenheim Lab, Ellard and Montgomery's studies point to a natural aversion in humans to boring architecture. The University of Waterloo summarized this project well. One of Ellard's most consistent findings is that people are strongly affected by building facades. If the facade is complex and interesting, it affects people in a positive way. Negative if it is simple and monotonous. For example, when he walked a group of subjects past the long smoked glass frontage of a Whole Foods store in Lower Manhattan, their arousal and mood states took a dive, according to the wristband readings and on-the-spot emotion surveys. They also quickened their pace as if to hurry out of the dead zone. They picked up considerably when they reached a stretch of restaurant and stores, where, not surprisingly, they reported feeling a lot more lively and engaged. Ellard's partner in the project, Charles Montgomery, sums up the psychological battle of modern space in his book Happy City. Montgomery writes, "As suburban retailers begin to colonize central cities, block after block of bric-a-brac and mom-and-pop scale buildings and shops are being replaced by blank, cold spaces that effectively bleach street edges of concavity." So now we know that the structures around us affect us profoundly. So now let's explore the previous comment on how each building sends a message to us. So what messages do our modern construction send to us? Obviously, I cannot answer this for everyone, but I can tell you the messages that I see. And I am of the opinion that what is true of one man is true of many. So I know that I will not be alone in these observations. So here is the messages as I interpret them. Come gather and wait in line at the slop distribution center, you pigs. You do not care what is in our food, and we do not care what it does to you. Stare at the bleak, depressing gray while you contemplate why you're awaiting 30 minutes in line for food that will turn into a depressant once digested. This building is meant to prepare you for that drop. It models your soul after eating here. Come into our lifeless warehouse. Pack in here like sardines while shopping for cheap goods made by slaves for a 400% profit. We encourage you to look upon the sad faces of fellow shoppers that are also struggling to budget and make ends meet. You are a part of a nation of wage slaves. Do not forget it. Come and worship the almighty dollar in our new megachurch complex. Here the metaphors remain thinly veiled as we spent your tithing money on a wonderful entrance while the back is a lifeless factory devoid of God's love. Come in and worship not as brothers and sisters in Christ, but as the unwashed masses that prop up this church's operation. Are you wanting a return to Soviet bloc architecture of the past, where the side of our buildings produces eyesores and reminds you that owning an actual home is an unobtainable dream? Then come over and live in malformed manors, rent starting at $4,000 a month. Welcome to Deer Creek Village, so named for the wildlife whose habitat we destroyed to build these cookie-cutter houses that are made out of plaster and dreams. You will be one of 1,000. Time to lease your life away. Now, some of that was a tad dramatic, I admit, but these are the emotions that's been striking me for years now as I see the world around me transformed into a lifeless consumer's hellscape. So where do we go from here? So obviously, I am not making the claim that every Arby's in the world need to be as grand as St. Peter's Basilica, and I'm not calling for a law that says all buildings need to be awe-inspiring. However, it is asinine to think that it is impossible for corporate buildings to have flair and beauty. Take these as examples. At this part in the essay, I come to an impasse. I am no architect. I'm not an architect by trade. I know no architects. It is safe to assume that the vast majority of those watching this video will never have a hand in designing a building. So what can we do? Because I refuse to believe that we have to accept our lot as modern humans. We have in our collective consciousness vast reservoirs of creativity and beauty that just need some encouragement to explode. So how do we become the change we want to see in the world? Well, I think it'll take a massive snowball effect to get the job done. Because the first thing we can do is just simply start noticing the architecture around you. And mainly what you find beauty in. Take a look at the world around you and find the structures that you find awe-inspiring and beautiful, and tell others why you think so. Point out that to your friends and family. And maybe then, just maybe, we can begin to bring back architectural consciousness to our fellow citizens so that they too may begin to find the beauty in the world around them. They too may be able to look at buildings they find edifying and start to change their perception of what architecture is. And perhaps if we continue to do this, our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren will live in a world where the citizenry does not accept their landscape to be marked by square, ugly architecture. Yeah, this may be a pipe dream, but to me, it is a dream worth having. Thank you for watching.